Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our webinar this afternoon. Today, the webinar will be about accelerating your smart factory journey in Malaysia. We have speakers and panelists in this session. A quick reminder before we proceed with our webinar today. Please note that this session is being recorded. Kindly use the chat as your back channel for questions and comments. Remain on mute if you're not speaking. Unmute only when you want to speak. And you may click on participants to share reactions. Without further ado, let me introduce you to the moderator for today, Ms. Hani Islam. Ms. Hani Islam is the managing partner of Best Events Productions in Riyadh Berhad, an agency owned by two women that produces trade shows such as the Innovate Tech Show 2022 and the Global Drone Conference and Hackathon 2019/20. Ms. Hanis is also the host of the Malaysia Entrepreneurs Network, MEN, and the Communications Director of the Malaysian Autonomous Intelligence and Robotics Association, MyIRA. Without further ado, Ms. Hanislam, the speaker is yours.
Yes, thank you for having us here today. As we know that smart factories is a very hot topic, especially when we want to boost our economy, using automation and IoT and Internet of Things for those who are not so familiar with the term. And we have the best experts with us today. I'm going to do a short introduction. So I'm going to start with Dr. Chua. I'm sure most of you here today know that Dr. Chua is the head of the Malaysian Smart Factory 4.0 under the Selangor Human Resources Development Center, SHRDC. And he's basically he has a PhD in control systems engineering. He's got he actually graduated from Monash University, Malaysia. His key area of expertise lies mainly the control and automation systems, fault detection and identification, FDI, and predictive maintenance strategies, which are really widely used in Industry 4.0 applications. He has also been appointed by the Malaysia Productivity Corporation, MPC, in collaboration with the Machinery and Equipment Productivity Nexus, MEPN, as one of the mentors or advisors for the Productivity 1010 initiative to support the industries in their journey towards digital transformation. And also with us today, we've got Mr. Muhammad Ashraf Husni Zai. He is the head IoT unit RD division in Telecom Malaysia Research and Development. So as a kid, he has always been passionate about breaking things apart, just like MacGyver, right, using parts to save himself, to see how they work. So now, as an Internet of Things IoT specialist with over 12 years in the industry, he has led tech teams to manage digital products and architected IoT solutions. He supports diverse industries, including manufacturing, which enables him to develop and weave together end-to-end smart IoT solutions to address business pain points in the era of IR 4.0. He is also the head of IT unit in TM R&D, the Innovation Hub for Telecom Malaysia Group. And last but not least, we've got Mr. Louis Zach Sherian. He is the account manager for Startup Malaysia, as well as Amazon Web Services, AWS. So he is a seasoned sales and customer relationship professional. He's got over 15 years of experience in technology, sales, and relationship management. He currently manages the startup territory profile for AWS in Malaysia, and he works closely with digitally native companies to grow and expand their business strategies and go-to-market initiatives through consultancy and tech initiatives. He is originally from India and has been in Malaysia since 2018, just in time for the COVID. where of course he would have to be stuck at home. So during this time, he has grown very close to the people and culture of Malaysia and would love to do his part to bring success and growth to the economy and development of Malaysia. So with that, I'm going to just go straight into the questions. We don't really have a lot of time. We want to end it hopefully by 2:50. So we have time for the audience to also ask questions, right? Okay. So I'm going to ask Dr. Chua first, right? This is a very common question, but a very important one, especially for those who are just starting out their smart factory journey, right? So how does a company know when they're ready to start their smart factory journey? And what are the steps involved or required for a successful implementation?
All right. Thank you, Hanis, for the question. And I believe that when it comes to smart factory and industry 4.0, right, the term industry 4.0 is not new to many people, right? We have the Germans have started it 11 years ago. Malaysia have started talking about industry forward initiative since 2018, right? And it's already about 4 years in when we talk about implementation of smart factories in Malaysia, right? And when we talk to many companies, especially the SMEs in Malaysia, right? We have a total of about 1,200 companies, or made primarily SMEs, that have done this thing called the readiness assessment by the Ministry of Industrial Trade and MITI, right? And this readiness assessment talks about how ready you are when it comes to Industry 4.0 smart factory implementation. But when we see the movement or the adoption of technologies, many companies are still uncertain about whether or not moving towards a smart factory is a right choice to go. Right, there's a lot of cost involved, and a lot of these SMEs primarily they are not so digital savvy, right? Put it that way. So when we introduce digital tools to them to think about, okay, these digital tools can help you to actually optimize your cost, right? To make you be more productive, right? To make you be more efficient. These are things that they could not really see the ROI. Right, and when we look at the entire process of how they actually start their journey, so we then compare them with companies that actually took the first steps, right? So we do have companies where we work with that really took the first step, and those are companies that I would say they take a leap of faith, right? And when they did that, the main primary factor of how they really decide whether they're ready or not, it really boils down to the top level management commitment, right? Once the business owner really wants to transform and they know that this is a situation that they must do rather than, a good to have, but this is a must have, then definitely we see that those companies are ready to move, right? Whereas some companies that they are more on, okay, I'll just wait for government to approve my grant, then only I'll do something. Now, those are companies that, they want to do it, but they're not so ready yet, right? So when we see the readiness of companies, we also gauge how is their commitment level from the top-down approach. And once they're very committed into starting their journey, it's almost automatically that they will already start the movement, whether big or small. So this is some of the experience that we had while working with a lot of SMEs in Malaysia.
But the thing is that there's a lot of preparations involved, right? It's not just the hardware. It's also about training the labor, the workforce, not only the people who are on the ground, but also top level, like what you're saying. They also need to understand what is involved, and it's not just like a 1 day, 2 day thing. How long does it take to actually properly train a team to move forward?
Okay, so when we talk about training the business owner level, right? We usually do it as a 2-day program, which goes very intensively on the real relevant technologies required when it comes to Industry 4.0 implementation for business owners, right? So business owners, they need to understand how things connect, how things work, right? Although technical, but they do need to understand that technicality. Now, why we go into that a bit deeper is because we notice that some companies in Malaysia, why they're not moving forward is because they had certain bad experiences. For example, they invested something, right? And they thought it's what they wanted, but in the end, it just didn't make sense, right? Or it didn't materialize the way that they envisioned it to be, right? So these are also companies that felt a bit demotivated, right? And that's where we try to teach the business owners that, hey, it's okay to not make it work the first time. Now is the time for us to make it better. Now, companies that have their own technical team, that's where we do technical training programs, and it really depends on how much that they want to achieve, right? And those programs are designed specifically for them to be able to learn how to implement technologies on their own, right? A lot of programs that we see, sometimes just goes very surface level. But when we design this kind of technology transfer programs for industries, we design it with the problem statement in mind, right? Like what the company really wants to fix, what the company really wants to achieve. That's how our programs are built, right? So then we go and explain to companies that, hey, there is an impact to learning how to do something, right? To actually start small and then eventually scale big. So that duration can range from a technical program minimum of 5 days to depending on what's the level of programs that they want to take, can go up to 5 to 15 days. Is really up to the company.
Thanks, Dr. Chua. So now we'll go back to, when you mentioned that some companies might have gotten burned, the expectations were not met. So Luis, we've got a question for you. So what are the common misconceptions about smart factories in your experience?
Hi, Hanis. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Awesome. So just I kind of backtrack from there, right? I mean, when you talk about misconceptions in smart factories, it's just if you have to kind of backtrack and just look at how technology is perceived, right? There's a lot of misconceptions around that as well. For instance, both you and Dr. Chua itself nailed some. Also, apologies for my voice because it's a little coarse, so apologies for that. It might get scratchy as I talk along, but yeah, please bear with me. So yeah, I mean, what I've noticed is, especially when we work on the digital side of things, right? So when you look at factories, you talk about operational technologies, which is your equipment and your legacy, engineering solutions that they have. And then you have your IT or your digital technology, right, which is basically what we do or other solutions providers provide, right? So the integration here is where the real game comes into play. And that's where I think, people like Dr. Chua is going around and working with founders and company owners to kind of have that top-down approach in terms of change of mentality. So a lot of misconception is obviously, I mean, just coming out of the whole smart factory perception itself. When you look at technology, when you just talk about cloud, when you go to any customer today, it's pretty much the same thing. You're talking about one, you having an infrastructure or your data center in your premises, or you want to host it on a public cloud where you can have a lot more flexibility or agility. So we run into this on a daily basis, right? A lot of people say, "Oh, cloud, it's not in my control. There's security issues, there's management issues, there's a lack of skill set." So these misconceptions come when you're not familiar with something, right? So I mean, 100 years ago, before the industrial revolution, I mean, there was a standard way of operations. I mean, I think things didn't evolve as fast, things didn't change as fast. But in the past 100 years, things have changed so fast. And I think one thing that we all need to be very geared about is that the faster we adapt to change, and especially business owners, the faster they understand their market situation, how the industry is evolving around them, and the faster they adapt to the changing scenarios around them, it's going to be better for them. So when it comes to misconceptions, most of the misconceptions that I've seen has come to how integration of technology, and in this case I'm talking about digital technology, right, and the skill sets that you spoke about earlier as well, comes into play in terms of how they want to operationalize their processes.
Thanks for that, Luis. And then we've got actually a question from Joe Wang, but we'll just gather a few more questions and then we answer them at the end if possible. Okay. So I'm just going to go to Ashraf. What's ahead for us in 2023, and how can manufacturers get more out of their IoT?
Thanks, Hannes. I tend to be cautious when it comes to trends because sometimes we think something's coming, but when people are ready for it, the device or the solution is not ready for implementation. But if I can just be a bit pragmatic, I can see a few trends in probably 3 key areas. The first one is what we call digital twins. And some of you may have heard about this term. And digital twins is not a single definition. It covers a diverse definition across different types of solutions. It can be a very simple type of visualization of data, or it could be very complex simulations. So for manufacturers, especially, we see a trend of now they're in an area where they collected enough data from their sensors, their machines. Now, how do they want to perceive the data? They want to see it in terms of visualizations. So now we're coming to a trend where you have this data now, and you want to see the visual view of all the data, especially in terms of graphs, where you can see the performance of a machine, how well it's running, in terms of your staff productivity, how well your staff or operator or operating machine, how well they're productive, do they make use of the time. So if a business owner has a visualization of all that data set, it's easier to make decisions. So now the more data is coming and the more tools are available for business owners to do visualizations, they can make better decisions. So now from a very basic visualization of data, you can now go into advanced simulations. So for those who are already matured in their smart factory journey, for example, if you are in aircraft maintenance, for example, you can now implement thousands of sensors on the aircraft. And from that sensors, you can paint a digital image of that physical aircraft. And you can see every single data point in terms of the status of the engine, the fatigue of the chassis, and all those data points, which goes up to a million or a few million, for example, can be put in the form of simulations, and you can actually simulate the physical into a digital form. So that's one of the trends that we see coming next year. Another trend is on the edge computing. So Luis talked about the perception of cloud. There's also a rise of edge computing. So now we go back on-premise where the factory is, and devices are now more intelligent and they can have more computing power. So what is the implication of that? So basically, if you're collecting data points from sensors, instead of sending all that data to the cloud, you can now actually process it in the factory itself. So one great example is machine vision. So if you're a business owner running a factory that relies on visual analysis, so you have to see the quality of the product. Is there any defects of the material? So instead of having a human to monitor that, you can set up a camera. So it's a machine vision camera that can analyze how much defects the product has. And that information can be analyzed on the spot at the factory itself, rather than waiting for the result to go to the internet. If you have network connectivity issues, you might have a delay in all the results. So all the results can be computed on the edge itself. So that's another trend that we are seeing. And this is especially true because most of the devices and edge computing solutions are getting cheaper. Before this, few years back, we never thought about Raspberry Pi or Arduino. This is like beyond people's imagination to implement those in factories. But now those devices are more accessible, they're very cheap, and they can be implemented in any form. So there's one trend that's coming up in the next few years. And lastly, having said about edge computing, we have to talk about IoT security. because sometimes we get so excited about a new technology coming in, or we want to implement IoT, set up new sensors, have a nice dashboard. And sometimes we overlook the security aspect of that. And now there's a growing awareness in the industry where if you're implementing a new technology, you always have to consider the security implications of those technologies. So we're starting from the device side. Make sure your device is fully secured. No one has physical access or even software access to the device. Instead of, they might hack or get sensitive information from the device, all the way up to the cloud. So you need to make sure that your platforms, your databases are fully secured. So all the millions of data points that you have collected, make sure they are secured, because as you know, you might heard in the news about ransomware, where even in Malaysia, there's a lot of cases where huge companies, their data has been compromised, and hackers are threatening the company with ransomware, so these things are real. It's happening all around the world, and never overlook the security of all the IR 4.0 solutions you are implementing. So before this, there was not much awareness, but now moving towards next year, there's more awareness, and also there are actually tools available to assess how secure your IoT solution is. So I would say those are the top three trends that are coming next year.
Great, thank you, Ashraf. Then I'll just also maybe just continue with you a little bit. We've seen a lot of dramatic supply chain issues, right, in the last year. And how would a better network technology help?
Oh, that's a great question. So I just talked about edge processing and why is beneficial, and that's because there's no dependency on the network. So now in IoT, we have Internet of Things. So Internet is definitely still very important in any IR 4.0 implementation. And I got to start by trying to separate networks. So we want to talk about networks on the local side. We call it local area network. So that is focusing on the factory premise itself. So anything within the factory floor, your connectivity within that is called a local area network. And the second part is your wide area network. So this is where your internet connectivity is. This is where your cloud platforms are residing. So it's very important to differentiate so that you can tackle it differently. So what challenge do we see for local area networks in factories is that, now you have machinery. Factories are not designed originally for IR 4.0 for sure. They just designed based on what products you're producing, and technology was somehow worked around it. So now you have buildings with machinery everywhere. You have multiple rooms with walls, thick walls. So if you're trying to implement a network in the local factory, you have to take these into considerations. So for example, if you're implementing an IoT sensor for a machine, for example, you're implementing a vibration sensor. So you want to detect the vibration of the machine to see this condition, right? So the worse the vibration, you can anticipate it's going to break down. So you have that sensor on the machine itself. So how would you want to extract the information back to your solution on your platform for analysis? So you have several options. You have a wired connection. You have a cable to pull from the sensor up to a gateway, whether to a fiber cable, which is immune to electromagnetic interference, or you can use Wi-Fi connectivity. And when you implement Wi-Fi, obviously it's not that stable. So you have to do a lot of surveying and design on where you want to place your access points to make sure that the data can go to the network without any interference. And thankfully now, you have more solutions than Wi-Fi. You have actually narrowband connectivity where you can use other frequencies to connect to your devices. We're going to have what we call LoRaWAN. We can have NB-IoT, where you can connect straight to the sensors without relying on Wi-Fi. So these are a lot of options for business owners to consider. And it's very important to work with someone who knows about all this. So technology partners who have experience deploying connectivity would already know these constraints on how to implement these local area networks. And second part is the wide area network, and you have many options about that. You have the fiber network. So again, this depends on where you are located. Some areas don't have internet. They are very rural areas. They only have maybe a copper line, not enough bandwidth. So that's why you have a mix of edge computing and cloud. So if you're an area where you have limited internet connectivity, for example, you just have satellite, do most of your processing in the factory, and then you send just summarized data up to the cloud through satellite connectivity. So different types of WAN area networks have different advantage and disadvantages. So it's very important to consider these different options. But now that we have 5G coming in, we have fiberization of urban locations. I think now business owners have more options to consider more cloud-based solutions. And touching on 5G, yes, it's a trend that is coming. I think it'll still take some time for business owners to take advantage of 5G because we have a deployment schedule, might take a few years, and the devices to connect to 5G are still under development. So always keep a lookout, but there are already available options you can use.
Thank you, Ashraf. And Dr. Chua, coming back to what Ashraf has already elaborated on, do you want to add your thoughts? Because you've also been in the industry for a long time.
Yep, I think what Ashraf mentioned is important, right? When it comes to networking and infrastructure, right? Many companies that I've visited, they are not in areas that are well connected, right, through the internet. They don't have very strong, internet connections, which then, when the industry 4.0 buzzword started off, people talk about, okay, applications, you can just send your data to the cloud, send everything to the cloud, everything is cheaper in the cloud. And, SMEs, they wanted to try. So of course they did invest to things being sent to the cloud, right? And those are not small investments. Those are actually quite big, right? We had one use case from a plastic manufacturer, right? Where he bought a cloud platform, integrated, quite expensive, right? Quite expensive system. And he just said, okay, you know what? Because of my internet connection, every day all I'm seeing is a loading screen, right? And there's no data being translated, no data being connected, and he just got very disappointed, right? Then when we educated and said, look, there is cloud-based potential, there is also edge-based potential, right? Which is your local area network. Right, so everything is run on-premise. You can monitor your data on-premise, send only the relevant information to the cloud, like what Ashraf mentioned, and it worked, right? And it's running 24/7. There's no hiccups on that. He's a very happy business owner now, right? And he started off. We started off with him with 2 machines, and eventually now he's done up to 6 machines on his own. Right, he had an engineer sort of help him to integrate all this together. We see that this was very encouraging, right? That internet connectivity shouldn't be stopping companies from starting their journey, right? It should be starting at that local area network, and then just seeing what are the potential infrastructure, and a little bit more on education on that would really help the companies to make better decisions.
Yeah, Hannes, I'd like to add up on top of Dr. Chua saying is again, it's very important to help the business owner on their journey, because we, for those who are providing solutions, they need to understand what are the main pain points. So if you are not ready for the full-blown solution, start off with something simple, address the biggest pain point they have, whether it's simple digitalization of some workflows that was very manual. Start off with something simple, and I think Dr. Chua mentioned about starting small first, so we can address small wins. So that will give more confidence for the business owner. Okay, something is working. I did one small change, and it make a big difference with the company. Then you start to scale up from there. So I think it goes to things like connectivity. If you don't have a connection yet to internet, you can start off locally, set up a few monitors for your operations team to monitor the status of your machines, and then once you have more investment into internet connectivity, once it's ready, then you can scale up to more complex analysis on the cloud. So the journey to smart factories doesn't have to be big bang. You can start off with something very simple, turning something manual like paperwork into Excel, into a web platform. That's enough to encourage the whole company. And as as Daz mentioned earlier, it's the business owner's vision to direct change. So once the business owner sees the change, that will that will cascade down to the rest of the company, where they see that there's a change and they will support that change as well.
Okay, thank you, Ashraf. Do we still have Louis around? Oh, yeah. Okay, his camera is off, but I think he is still around. Louis, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. So, okay, I think the camera is maybe giving an issue, but
Okay, so my camera is off, is it?
yeah.
Okay, strange. I can actually see myself.
It doesn't matter. But the next question is actually for you. So maybe your camera will meraju or something. Tak
Sure.
apa. So we've talked about connectivity in rural areas is a bit more difficult. People are feeling the barrier to entry and stuff like that, right? So, but we know that the benefits of 5G is lower latency, but the problem with that is that not a lot of endpoints are with 5G enabled. So the average machine age across manufacturing globally is actually 25 years old, which means there's a lot of equipment that can communicate with 5G. There's not a lot of equipment that can communicate with 5G, right? So how is AWS working with vendors who are making hardware to become 5G enabled? And how do you lower the barrier to entry?
Understood. Thanks, Anis. Just to kind of give you an indication of how AWS operates, right, is there are things that we do, and then there are things that we are very, very good at partnering with the ecosystem around. So when you look at how we have partnered ourselves around IoT devices, or so we have services called AWS IoT Core, AWS IoT Greengrass. Greengrass allows you to process your data where you actually pick it up, and then export it to IoT Core, right? But again, this all depends on the third-party, some of the third-party softwares and third-party edge devices as well. So from AWS's perspective, we are always working towards identifying those partnerships that make a difference. Because if you look at how we segmentize, I focus on startups, but SMB and enterprise segments are focused a lot around manufacturing and industry grade customers, right? So we have globally been constantly churning our roadmap towards how do we partner. So the way we've segmented this is, we kind of qualified across, edge devices that can, or devices that can, cater to our service offerings. I like IoT Core, IoT Greengrass, Amazon Kinesis for video streaming, and then, solutions around 5G. And then we also have solutions that we partner with, manufacturers like OnLogic, AdLink, Lenovo, across asset tracking, development kits, edge servers. So our partnership runs kind of deep in that aspect, if to answer your question, because we do not build the hardware or the solution that basically creates the connectivity gaps, right? But what we do is we basically partner with people who allow to fulfill that gap problems and integrate it with our services. So that's the way we operate it. Globally, we do have a lot of use cases that are 5G enabled, but in this region, not yet. I think especially specific to Malaysia, that's something that's upcoming. There's a lot of buzzwords around 5G. We've done a lot of road shows in Penang with regards to how we're looking at Industry 4.0 and how AWS can help there. But 5G and connectivity there is something that we'll have to figure out, because some of these partnerships are global, and it gets kind of allocated to other regions as and when there is exposure and requirement that comes up. So it needs to reach that maturity for that.
Thank you. Joe, I hope that kind of answers your question, because you're not, in terms of technology, it's no issue for you, right? It's more about how to lower the barrier of entry. So hopefully with the partnerships that AWS has fostered with, you might be able to find a solution for that, right? Okay, and we've got like about 10 minutes for maybe one more question. So before we open the questions to the floor. So all of you can answer, right? In terms of labor shortage, people are always talking about labor shortage. Many factories are facing this problem. Not many factories, actually a lot across industry, right? So Dr. Chua, I think maybe this question might be something that is very first-hand experience for you. What talents are needed to successfully implement smart factory plans? And how is this being funneled from our education system? And what skills and mindset do employees need in the future smart factory? I know it's like so many questions at one time, so but try to answer as best as you can.
Sure, no problem. I think the question on talents is always something that we hold very close to our heart, right? We believe in a people-focused strategy when it comes to any kind of technology implementation, right? And this is also why our initiatives to actually help companies to adopt technologies have been very human-centric. Right. That means we don't just talk about technology implementation through just buying technologies, but we're looking at the whole ecosystem of, you look for the technology, you innovate, you implement, you accelerate, and then you really transform. Right. And when you talk about talents in Malaysia, right, we do have good talents, right? We do have good talents. And they are definitely keen to learn and keen to help companies in Malaysia to transform, right? But the next question would be, are companies ready to adopt these talents in their companies to help them transform, right? So it has come to a very big problem right now where, companies are not seeing the value of high-skilled talents in their companies, right? I'm talking more on the SME side. MNC side, they know what they need. They know what they need to do. They're very good, ready to go, right? I'm talking about SME sites, right? Or local large companies, right? I've been to factories where you see zero engineers, zero technical people, and they're still making money every year, right? But this cannot continue for the long term, because when you talk about Industry 4.0, it's not just about implementing dashboards, implementing hardware that will say, okay, my factory is now a smart factory and it's intelligent, right? You need to have people to look at the data, to really understand it, to implement improvement strategies for the companies, right? And that's where some companies did not realize that when they started their smart factory journey. And that actually sort of affects their progression, because they have no one in the factory to really see that implementation through, right? Now, coming to the skills and competency of the talents, right? Nowadays, technology has advanced so quickly that there is really not a very big need when it comes to implementation of technology for someone to really know how to do very extensive programming, right? We always tell companies that, okay, look, you have a very experienced programmer that can build your website from a full stack development, you can build a website. But do you really need that experienced programmer to do it? Or can you use tools that are, low code development, low code to no code development to actually build something for you? Right, I give this scenario of, okay, that there's a video that I watched by a YouTube video by someone from India, right? So you have one guy who needs to code a website from scratch, and one person who used a low-code website development tool to build a site, right? With all the features or payment features, e-commerce, whatever that you need, right? And the person both started at the same time. And one of them is not an experienced coder, and she finished the entire site in 3 days, right? Whereas the other person at the 7th day is still trying to get things to work and solving a lot of bugs, trying to solve a lot of issues. So this comes to functional over aesthetics, right? And that's where I always tell industries that, look, you want things to be functional, right? There are so many tools out there that will help you to get something functional up and running. And you evaluate from there straight away, because what you want is functionality rather than aesthetics, practicality, right? So nowadays talents, when they come out from the universities, they need to learn all these tools that will help them to actually implement technologies fast, right? So that's where they learn things like node rate programming, a little bit of JavaScript, but not so much low-code tools like Nine, data analytics platforms. So this helps them to actually kickstart things faster, right? And a lot of skills in the university, we noticed that it's not easy to cram so much technology in that short period of time, right? But the most important thing that the talents need to have is that hunger to learn something new and that passion to really learn. Once they have that, that actually speeds up a lot of development process. And if the companies, SMEs are willing to take that leap of faith to employ these people, train people to implement technologies for them, I believe that we are on the right track. But right now, we are focusing a lot on trying to revamp our education system or revamp the skills and programs, when at the demand side, we are not solving that yet. Because the demand itself is not asking for skilled engineers in manufacturing, right? They are looking, every time I speak to a manufacturer, the first thing they'll tell me, I don't have enough operators. But why are we talking about operators now? We need to talk about skilled people, right, in your factory. So until that day that is fixed, right, we are churning out more supply than what is demand. So this then causes a lot more issues down the road, right? And I think all of us have also heard about, the situation of, engineer salary not being, properly, revised for the past many years. And right now, the younger generation are also thinking, if I have to start at this salary range, which is the same range as what Uniqlo would pay me, so why am I being an engineer? So then becomes another problem of where you have that STEM education not being properly adopted. More people are not going to STEM. So it's a chain effect, and it's something that we need to solve. But I think the main part of it is the demand side, right? There needs to be demand for these people, and there needs to be real solid demand from them, right? And when I look at the Q&A, for example, like one of the questions we're asking, the first thing is, how is the government supporting smart factory initiatives? The government actually provides a lot of support, right? But if you notice the entire support provision from that, the funding or subsidy or whatnot provided by companies, there's very little emphasis on the people side. So this is where we are trying to advocate companies to start thinking of that, because when it comes to ESG implementation later on, that people factor needs to be included as well. So this is the things that is ongoing now that we're trying to solve as well.
Yeah, so there's definitely the supply demand thing. And whatever you learn in universities, when they graduate, things might already have evolved. So it might no longer be relevant. So it's more like an ongoing training thing where employers have to consistently send their workforce to an institution to always upgrade their skill sets, right? Technical skill sets. Okay.
Yeah.
So now it's already 2:49. I think we'll leave 10 minutes for the two questions that have come in from the audience. One is from Kumaran. He's asking about what the private network LTE and 5G opportunity in Malaysia is, how private network potential can support rural or urban SMEs in Malaysia. So I think this would be more suitable for Ashraf.
Yes, thanks, Sun. Yeah, I was waiting to answer this question. Actually, private networks for LTE and 5G, at this stage, right, they're kind of investment heavy, meaning those who are opting for private networks would typically be companies who are very large. They have a lot of factories in there, for example, like Intel in Penang, many factories, and they can afford to implement a private network. So at this stage, private networks, so to define private network is basically setting up a dedicated base station just for your company. So instead of connecting to a public network, like we connect to the main players in the market, like Maxis, Celcom, and DG, for example, you have your own SIM card to connect to your own private network. So at this stage, it's only applicable for certain industries who can afford it, especially like oil and gas. So when it comes to rural or urban SMEs, it's still out of reach. But having said that, there are solutions out there from the telcos that still in development, where you can opt for a SIM card that has priority access. So your SIM card will have priority on top of other consumers. So you can have like a private network experience. So those type of solutions, they're more accessible, and hopefully they can address for those who need a so-called private network, and it's more affordable than a dedicated infrastructure. So that will be coming. But right now, a dedicated private network is still not reachable yet for rural or SMEs at this stage.
Maran, I hope that answers your question. Actually, Farah, your question with regards to the manufacturing renaissance, creating high quality jobs, innovative growth, and seeing Malaysia going down the same path. I think actually Dr. Chua has kind of like touched it in the question about talent pool and things like that. Dr. Chua, Louis, I mean, you both, India, Malaysia, we are seeing a lot of growth in technology. So what's your thought on this? Well, maybe start with Louis first, and then we go to Dr. Chua.
Sure. This is in relation to Farah's question of the manufacturing renaissance, right? Got it. Let me just quickly add on what Dr. Cho was saying earlier. I think that is extremely insightful and important, right? What I really believe and what we really see is that I think there is always going to be a talent shortage. You can cut it across any industry, any role. We talk to startups on a day-to-day basis. We talk to customers on a day-to-day basis. While the market is tough right now, you always see them looking for specific roles, right? But what we understand, in especially industries and enterprise companies, is that I think the culture needs to change. And this is where Dr. Chua hit the nail on the head. The way the business sees things and creates the demand for it, right? And what they want to see in terms of change is very, very critical. Let me just read out an interesting stat from McKinsey, right? So this is a global study according to McKinsey, and this is why you see countries like South Korea really wanting to implement this kind of manufacturing renaissance. And if business owners or factory owners or SME owners today have this kind of vision, or can see this kind of forecast, they probably will accelerate towards at least identifying what they need to do, right? So what it says is that manufacturers can use industrial IoT data to reduce product development costs by up to 50%, reduce their operating costs by 25%, and increase gross margins by 33%. Just to add on to this example, right, one of our biggest customers in terms of manufacturing, and when you talk about manufacturing specifically to smart manufacturing, right, is Volkswagen Group. They're the ones that build all the Volkswagen cars, the Lamborghinis, the Audis, the Porsches of the world. Just to give you a snippet of how they consider themselves now, they consider themselves of keeping the goal of becoming the world's leading software-driven automotive company. Imagine being a manufacturing company for so long and now coming with that tagline saying that they want to be the world's leading software-driven automotive company. Volkswagen alone produces 11 million cars annually, right? And using, a lot of IoT devices, IoT software and technology, and AWS services, Volkswagen was able to, yield 30% increase in productivity, 30% decrease in factory costs. They were able to save 1 billion in supply chains costs. These are numbers that are real. These are numbers that are, actual statistics and figures based on research and actual studies. And if SMEs and business owners were, educated on, this is what a collaboration with, your operational technology and digital technology can, really lead to, the future, or Industry 4.0 can really be the outcome for your business. I think that cultural change can start coming in immediately, right? But of course, these are numbers. There was a lot of hard work that goes into it. There's, of course, a lot of expense that goes into it as well. It's not easy. But to achieve this kind of renaissance, people need to see that the end outcome, or what they're going to get, is a lot more insights from the data that they collect across their manufacturing lines, across their modes of operation and see how they can tweak areas to make it so much more productive, right? Eliminate waste, create more profit in areas where they can eliminate waste. So these kind of things align back to what Dr. Chua was saying, that the SME owners and the businesses need to think differently, and hence create demand for the right kind of talent, right? And that could definitely lead, and that's why I see it that it's a culture thing. Changing that culture or that mindset is definitely going to be able to lead towards a renaissance towards how Malaysia can change their smart manufacturing point of view.
Thank you so much, Louis and Dr. Chua, and Ashraf. Maybe just based on this question, your thoughts, and then we shall, I think, close this session because I think that'll be over 3 o'clock already. Yeah.
Yeah. We can see that globally, many countries are starting to move very much into this space, and also very fast, right? And when we see, our neighboring countries, how they are doing it is really from educating the community first, right, about these technologies, making sure that they really understand what they're going to invest in. And that actually helps to speed up the entire process, right? Because what we don't want to happen is that right now, we are making assumptions that company knows what they want, but actually they don't, right? We are putting in a lot of information, very high level information that, hey, this can be done, that can be done, and companies see a lot of uncertainty in it. And when we look at global movements in this space, right? They are starting to see that it needs to start from the people part first, because if the people side is convinced, they are committed, they are really ready to go, everything else will just fall into place, right? And we see that happening a lot in Thailand, Vietnam. You can imagine, right, that when I spoke to a factory in Vietnam about the technology that we were sharing to build a smart factory, how it's what technology you need, just through a virtual call during an MCO, right? They recently they just told me, right, Dr. Chua, we actually got a local Vietnamese trainer to train our team exactly like what you showed us, and we are already implementing it, right? That's how fast Vietnam is moving, right? And then it gets me thinking, how is Malaysia going to move to the next step, right? And there's a lot more work for us to do, right? And we really need to work together in this space in order to get things moving. Yeah, that's just my thoughts on it.
Okay, there is actually one more question from the audience, which is with regards to Sabah and Sarawak in particular. In the rural areas, how can we make sure that the people there are not being left out in the smart factory journey? And what would be the first step to help them in starting this journey? So I'm gonna just open this to Ashraf first, and then Louis and Dr. Chua, you may also add in your thoughts.
All right, thanks, Anis. So from my perspective, it's more on the infrastructure side. I don't have much experience working with customers in East Malaysia, but from what I know, on the experience I have, the connectivity portion is always the constraint. Without good connectivity, there's not much technology you can implement in those areas. So unfortunately, there is some progress with the Jendela program that the government is spearheading to increase coverage of 4G, for example, but it's obviously not as fast enough to push the smart factories agenda forward. But having said that, companies like TM, we are deploying some solutions where it helps address coverage in rural areas. So hopefully, when the infrastructure is there, it will enable other technologies to come in and support the journey to smart factories as well. And yeah, I mean, it's definitely a challenge, but there's always a need for awareness for all the stakeholders. So even the state governments needs to be aware about how smart factories can benefit all these business owners in Sabah and Sarawak, and how it will help obviously in the GDP of the country, so the states. So is when you have that awareness, like Dr. Chua mentioned, when everyone has awareness of the benefits of going to smart factories, the benefits of implementing technologies such as IoT, and how it increases the business value, then people will be aware, okay, I know that this will benefit me. How do I do that? So the stakeholders who have that control and that power and authority should have that awareness so that they can help all these business owners to start adopting these technologies.
Thanks, Ashraf. Louis, you like to add to that?
Just doubling down on everything Ashraf said, right? That's pretty much key in terms of when you look at smart factories and having those, having people to back you up for sponsorship to make sure that the technology is available to the people. Outside of that, something that we are actively doing in AWS, especially from the startup team, is because when you talk about our services, it's collaborating with the digital services side. We identified recently, we went for the Borneo Tech Summit thanks to Dr. Richard. Thanks to Richard, and we identified the talent that's available, the hunger that East Malaysia has towards ramping up. And so one of the things that we decided is that from AWS's point of view, we are going to figure out how to collaborate with universities and develop. One thing is we're definitely creating a user group for developers. It might start small. We get the sponsorship of some of our customers who are going to be leading these groups, getting the communities together. It's all about learning and enablement, right? People need to start thinking out of the box. They need to realize that, oh, this technology is that I can do this with my life, or I can do this, I can create an application. That's when you start thinking differently, right? That's when you start thinking digitally. And then to kind of ramp it up and to catch it in the grassroots, we are collaborating with universities to basically run certain amount of training programs, certain amount of what's that word? Basically identifying that, oh, the art of the possible, right? Oh, AWS can do this. Oh, there's cloud services that can do this. So we're going to enable them very early on. We can see how we can drive training and certification so that there are people that are, when they are coming out of college, they're going to think differently. They're probably going to create the tools that can, complement what manufacturing companies or local businesses in Sarawak is doing. So that's the thought process. But of course, it all needs to come together.
Thank you, Louis. And lastly, Dr. Chua, do you want to add something to that?
Yep, definitely Sabah Sarawak is not out of our radar in terms of the support that we can provide. In fact, we do work with collaborators from Sarawak and even Sabah to actually help the SMEs and also companies there to actually transform. So definitely, if there's a urgent need, that you need support there is definitely possible, right? And with technology nowadays, learning how to start your smart factory journey, it's definitely accessible, right? During the pandemic, we had people coming from out of states, even Sabah Sarawak to just dial into our equipments and get things running, right? Of course, if internet connectivity is one of the major issue, right, in terms of getting started, start at the edge base first, get things locally connected so that you can at least see some value, right? Set up some on-premise solutions first and then slowly get from there. And I think that is definitely possible to achieve.
Great. Thank you so much for your questions. And thank you, dear panelists, Dr. Chua, Ashraf, and Louis, for spending time with us today. Hopefully, the audience has learned a bit more about, starting up your smart factory journey or accelerating it. I'll pass it back to Angel to summarize. Oh, Richard, you want to say something? Did Richard want to say something? Oh, no. I saw him for a while and then he disappeared.
Yeah, Richard is joining.
Okay.
Richard, would you like to say maybe a few words?
All right. Thank you, everyone, to be part of this panel session. This is actually a very simple session co-organized together with Richard Kerr Digital. We're trying to highlight some of the Malaysian success stories as well. Hopefully, everyone gets to work together to build this amazing ecosystem. I think there's a lot of opportunities for a lot of players in Malaysia to be working together to really drive this and to compete in the regional and, of course, global level. So thank you from our company. Angel, do you want to do a parting? Maybe thank everyone.
Yes. Thanks everyone for joining with our session today. I hope that every information that was shared, all the questions and answers will benefit you guys in some way. Do follow Selangor Human Resource Development Corporation as a Facebook page, and we'll see you again.
Thank you very much. And you can always connect me on LinkedIn as well. Appreciate any discussions on IoT.
The
Thank you.
panelists, please stay on. Just want to do a sync up real quick. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.